Hey, what's going on, guys? This is the Leafs Convo podcast presented by Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario. OakRidgeFord.com. I'm Norman James along with Mike Augello. It is January 12th, 2020. The Maple Leafs getting ready to get back on the ice after missing Saturday hockey. How sacrilege. Mr. Augello, you and I have taken a bit of a break. It's been a week. The last time we spoke, things were all fine and dandy. Since then, the Leafs have lost 2 home games, and Tampa's gone absolutely batshit crazy. 10 straight wins. They're ahead of the Leafs in the standings by 4 points. Boston's ahead of the Leafs by 11 points. Florida's coming at the Leafs Panthers tonight. What the heck happened?
Good morning, Norm. Well, I mean, it took half a season for Tampa to sort of get their sea legs after, them getting knocked out by Columbus last April. And now the juggernaut that we realized was there is finally, it's finally reappeared. I mean, they've won 10 games in a row. They haven't lost since before Christmas. A friend of mine was at the game last night where Tampa won 1-0 in Philadelphia, and they played shutdown playoff hockey. So that, you expected that to happen. There's too much talent there. There's too much experience there. That was going to be the case. And we knew Boston was going to come back. We maybe hoped that there would be a Stanley Cup hangover, but there really wasn't. I mean, halfway through the season, the division is where we thought it was going to be. Toronto, Tampa, Boston, in whatever order in the top 3. Florida very close behind. It's very possible that, one of those 4 teams finishes in the wild card and finishes in third, second, or first. So it's a jumble. But and thankfully, after their slow start, the Leafs are in that mix. I think Buffalo and Montreal have fallen by the wayside, so it's a 4-team race. And now it's a question to get where you need to be before the first week of April and the start of the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't want to beat on the Habs. Ilya Kovalchuk, that was a fantastic acquisition. But for a team that's looking for more flash than substance, I mean, he'll fit the bill just to help ease that season into the warm bath that it's easing into. This is the Leafs Convo podcast. The Atlantic is Boston, Tampa Bay, Toronto right now in that order. Boston a plus 35, Tampa outrageous plus 34, scoring all sorts of goals, just one behind the Maple Leafs on a season total now. The Leafs a plus 17. So work to make that differential even more of a disparity between the goals and goals against. But they are certainly playing like they are a contender, at least of late. Never mind the 2 losses at home to Winnipeg and Edmonton. We can't go too far back, Mike, because it's been a week. But Connor McDavid scored one of the greatest goals I've ever seen. And it was just the most unbelievable skill, savvy, cunning move with speed that anyone can ever witness. And, the Leafs got over that. Then it's Winnipeg scoring late. Austin Matthews with that big bomb, like only Austin Matthews can score it. And then they lose in the shootout. Looking at those 2 games, even after the great run they were on, what still resonates with you as cautionary with the Maple Leafs about to play the Florida Panthers?
That there's still those gaps of, I'd say, vapor lock defensively, especially against Edmonton. It was 1-0 after 1, and then Edmonton scores 2 goals in the first couple minutes of the second period, and Sheldon Keefe yanks Freddie Anderson and says to his team, "I'm not going to expose our goaltender to your defensive lapses." And then they bounce back, and then in the third period, McDavid makes that play on Riley. Who, it was ironic that the next day Jonas Siegel came out with a piece in the Athletic and said that something that I've been sort of had a feeling on, that Riley has been playing hurt because normally Riley wouldn't get burned by McDavid like that. Riley is a premier skater, but he got burned badly on that play. But the overall play, in these couple games is defensively, there was a 4-on-1 break in the Winnipeg game. I mean, the Leafs kept bouncing back. They kept giving up a goal to Winnipeg. They bounced back and tied it. They bounced back from 2-1. Then they scored with, I think, 15 seconds left in regulation with Matthews with that shot. Defensively, it's just they're not playing well at times. They're still giving up way too good opportunities. And then in overtime, Freddie Anderson had to stand on his head after a sort of average regulation in that game. they can't completely depend on Anderson being, standing on his head to be able to win games. They have to play more competent defensively. You can play wide open offensively during the regular season, but again, you have to be able to play that sort of strap down defensive style or play a little more responsibly in the playoffs. And again, I don't see this team being able to do that. They averaged 5 goals per game during that 10-game point streak.
Do you think this recent run makes some people even more dismissive of the idea of lockdown hockey, defensive hockey, Mike? Because we've seen how much the Leafs can dominate over this period of time. Never mind changing your style. This is all they really need. They're going to win the Stanley Cup just like this.
Yeah. How did that work last year after the first half of the season where they were scoring like crazy, and then in the second half, everything they were basically a 500 team because things tighten up around the All-Star break through the rest of the regular season and into the playoffs. If you don't learn how to play that style, you will make an early exit. A team like St. Louis can play both wide open, has the offensive tools, but can play a different style in the playoffs, or can play a physical style that is conducive to the playoffs. So can Boston, so can Washington. Gee, those are the last 3 Stanley Cup winners. What do they have in common?
Well, Tampa Bay has a lot to atone for, having won the President's Trophy last season and then getting dumped embarrassingly so in the first round by Columbus. What are the Maple Leafs trying to make up for? What are they making amends for based on last season? Is this, and I've said this, and I'm guilty of repeating this almost to a degree of nausea. It's Boston or bust. Beat Boston. Is that it for the Maple Leafs when you compare it to where Tampa, where their head's at, wanting to, run the table here, rip through the playoffs and win a Stanley Cup, the one they probably should have won last season?
Well, I think this season is an experiment for Kyle Dubas because we know he's basically gone all in on speed and skill. They shed some of the veteran players like Hainsey, like Marleau in the offseason. They traded Kadri to get Tyson Berry and Alex Kerfoot. They've gone heavy on, we're going to be the speediest team. We're going to be the team with the most skill. Try to stop us and see what happens in the playoffs. If that's the case, you could say, well, they got to Game 7 against Boston the last 2 years and lost in Game 7. Does going more heavy on skill throughout their lineup make a difference? We'll see. If it doesn't, then I think that Kyle Dubas is going to have to sort of rejig, readjust, because he knows that if this hasn't worked this year, and he may go with it for another year. But I think the reality there is you need players that can play that way and players that can play with skill. And I think they'll have to adjust accordingly. But I think they're going to go into this playoffs playing the way that they've played now, and he believes that they'll have success. Where's
the best place for the Maple Leafs to end up when the regular season is over? Among the divisional leaders or in a wild card spot?
If they finish in the first or second wild card spot, then they're playing either the top division winner in the Atlantic or the top division winner or the division winner in the Metro. That could be Washington or Tampa or Boston. So, and if it's third place in the Atlantic, it's probably Tampa or Boston. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. It would be nice for them to get home ice advantage, but they had Game 6 at home last year against Boston and didn't win. So I don't think home ice advantage is going to make the difference. I think it doesn't make too much difference. They're going to come up against a team that is probably better set up for playoff success, and they're just going to have to beat them. And if they can't beat them, then they're going to have to get better next summer, making adjustments to be able to beat those teams. You can keep doing the same thing over and over, but that's called insanity.
Lord Longmarch from Community. Is it just me, or does it look like 20 teams could be contenders for the Cup?
It's him. There's not 20 contenders. I would say that, Lord, I would say there's probably, realistically, it's 7 or 8 teams. I'd say 4 in each conference. If you go Eastern Conference, I would say Washington, Boston, Tampa, and then a couple teams like Pittsburgh or Toronto. You could see an avenue in the West. I think it's St. Louis, maybe Vegas, and possibly Dallas with their goaltending, and they've seemed to get on track lately. So they're you have to be realistic. I mean, sometimes the Cinderella story happens, but more than likely, it's just the top teams in the conference.
Lord Longmarch, see you at the X. Go Leafs, go. Are the Leafs as good as they want to be? Are they the only obstruction to their ultimate glory, or are they still not good enough yet? They still have to prove that they can beat the Bostons and the Tampas, and then who knows, even the Washingtons, and show that they're at that status. Again, there are factions of Leafs fans who believe that this team is as good as it wants to be whenever it wants to be because Kyle Dubas has laid out the blueprint and the team is following as such. I feel like, this recent run has been great to get the Leafs back into a position where they're among the elites again. So can they elevate themselves to the very next level and actually take down the elites, take down their contemporaries among the top third of the league? We're going to get a stark reminder of just how hard this game is and just how much more you're going to need to succeed in the end than just skilled hockey. You need that. That's the absolute basis of what you're trying to do, but you're going to need more. And if you don't add more, you're going to be left at the altar time in and time out, the same way the Maple Leafs have been over the past several years.
I think Kyle Dubas has made it, fairly clear that if he sees an avenue to improve the team, that he would go down that avenue. Good. I mean, like we mentioned before we started recording, there was a note from Pierre LeBrun earlier this week before Justin Williams signed a 1-year contract with Carolina that the Leafs had talked to Williams and his representatives. And he also talked to Boston and a couple other teams, and it may have been because Carolina was taking a hard line on his contract, but the Leafs wouldn't have talked to him if they weren't interested in bringing him in. And it ended up being a veteran minimum deal, but there is maybe a bit of a leadership gap after Marleau and Hainsey and Tyler Ennis and other players have left, and they would have been interested. Now there's also talk, and Elliot Friedman mentioned it last night on the Hockey Night in Canada broadcast, that the Leafs might kick tires on a veteran defenseman like Brendan Dillon. He's 32 years old. He's big. He's a left-hand shot. I mean, he would provide, something on the left side that may not be there, that could be a help in a playoff run. But he's a rental, and how much will that cost? And can they create the cap space necessary to accommodate Dillon's $3.2 million salary? If San Jose is up against the cap just like the Leafs are, so they can't retain salary in the deal. So that it's gonna necessitate them moving out a salary like a Cody Ceci or making another deal where they clear somebody else out. So those are the hurdles that Kyle Dubas faces before February 24th. But I think if he sees an avenue to improve the team, he will explore it.
Yeah, the market for players the Leafs can consider and potentially get to come into Toronto and help will grow over the next several weeks as we move closer to the NHL trade deadline. So much fun, folks. Please like, subscribe, and vote in community. YouTube.com/The Leafs Convo. OGs, converts, thank you so much for all of your support. You know how much it means to us. Tell your friends. Let's grow this thing. It would be nice to get to about 3,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel by the playoffs. I think we can do it. I put in community another poll. No Leafs Saturday night. How big a deal is this to you? 133 votes, great participation. 70%, Mike, said it sucks. Are you surprised by that?
No, because as a kid, I basically Saturday night, sit in front of the TV, watch Hockey Night in Canada, watch the Leafs play. It was just a quirk of the schedule. And I think it happens later this month when the All-Star break happens, but everybody will be off that night. But yeah, it was weird. I went out to dinner. It was a non-Leaf Saturday night, which was bizarre. So I'm not used to that, but I don't think they have many during the rest of the season. And Ottawa, Montreal, and especially Edmonton, Calgary was extremely entertaining when I see Zach Kassian and Matthew Tkachuk beating the crap out of each other.
Just a couple more things before we go. Cool and trending. Just glad you don't live here in Detroit. 226 losses between the teams here: Tigers, Lions, Wings, and Pistons in the 2019 calendar year. It is the worst of any city or market in the history of North American professional sports. Toronto sports as a whole have been pretty great over the past 7 to 8 years. Lots of championships, lots of playoffs. One city's sports reign has subsided. Maybe the Maple Leafs can encapsulate what has been a pretty good run for Toronto sports at some point in the near future with the Stanley Cup. Last word to you.
Yeah, we can only hope that the trend in Detroit follows in Boston with the Red Sox and the Patriots and the Bruins and the Celtics. Although I like the Celtics, but that they have a drought after so many years of success that Detroit had. But I mean, put things in perspective and wind on this. The Leafs have made the playoffs the last 3 years. That's great. That's not satisfactory. This team should have made the playoffs multiple years because they've had the resources to put a good team on the ice, and until recently they haven't. It's not about making the playoffs. It's about advancing and winning Stanley Cups. And this team has not won a Stanley Cup in 52 years and has not advanced past the first round in 15 years. The Leaf fan base bought into the rebuild in 2015, and they were smart to do so because that was the direction that this team needed to go for a number of years. And now we're seeing the fruits of that. But now the task at hand is advance, at least win a round, get to the conference final, get to the Stanley Cup final, win a cup. That's what you need to see from the Leafs over the next few years. We'll see if it happens.
You know what, Mike? We can fret and freak out about the Leafs' fate in the Stanley Cup playoffs when the playoffs actually begin. Between then and right now, there's a lot that will go down, including more exhilarating hockey, courtesy of your Maple brothers, the trade deadline, and everything else that's going to come in between. So let's try to enjoy it, shall we? Michael, have a good one, buddy.
Thanks, Norm.